right, good morning. Good morning. All right, everyone's awake. Good. Glad to see people are functioning after last night. Most of you enjoy Zed. How many of you did the call out to Werner at the end? Not. Well, no one did. Okay, so all of you went home early and slept so you can go be here at my session. Great. I appreciate it. So my name is Shabazz Lam. I am a managing consultant in professional services out of the New York City office. Today we're here to talk about the Cloud Adoption Framework. How many of you are actually on AWS today? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have production workloads running on AWS? Of those of you, how many have at least 5? 10? 20? All in? 1, 2-ish. Okay, we'll take it. So for today's session, we're going to talk through the journey to the cloud. All of you have started on this path of moving over to the cloud, this new paradigm shift in IT. What does that mean? What is the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, how that can help you? And we're going to follow that up with a true case. We have Nick Otto from SAS, who will be talking about their journey to the cloud and what were some of the lessons learned and the things that they did in real life. Cloud adoption is more than just technology. We hear all of these things around, I have to worry about my software, I have to worry about application optimization, you got this cool hip word called DevOps. How many of you guys are doing DevOps? How many of you guys are trying to be agile but not really there yet? So the whole idea is when you're thinking about the cloud, there's a technology piece, but the piece that's even more important are all the non-technical pieces. So how do you think about cloud adoption? Right? We want you to first start thinking about where you are today. Right? What are the reasons for the cloud? Why do you want to get there? Right? Part of this is around, well, are you there for cost? Do you have is your time to market really slow? Does it take you a long time to achieve what value you're trying to do? Do you have a lot of people who are focused on non-value-added tasks? Or are they just focused on backups and patching? Are they just focused on making sure that your storage array is up and running? Right? And think about where you want to go. Right? Do you want to try and lower your costs? Do you want to get faster time to market? Do you want to be more agile? Do you want to have more flexibility in terms of where your employees are working and what they're trying to do? Do you want to have a focus on your core business? Right? So we want you to start by understanding where your business objectives are and what your constraints are going to be. Think through what's your competitive advantage. What do you want to go ahead and try to build from it? Do you want to reduce the cost of your traditional IT? Do you want to adapt? Right? Align your IT to your business strategy. Most of the time, IT is always thought of as a cost center. Right? It's there to help make sure that the business functions and operates. But very few times do we really see that IT actually ends up being a partner with the business, and IT is there to enable the business. Right? So start by aligning your IT to your business strategy. Right? And then understand what your organization's capabilities are. Right? Are you a small, agile, nimble organization? Are you large? Have you been around for 100+ years? Right? Do you have a regional footprint? Are you global in nature? Right? Where's your operational maturity? Right? Do you have a fully centralized environment with one shared services group? Or are you a completely decentralized environment, or are you somewhere in between with a federal state model? Right? What's your internal culture like? Do you embrace new technologies? Do you embrace new ways of functioning and innovative ways of thinking? Think through how that will all impact what your journey to the cloud is going to look like. And then also keep in mind what your vertical influences are. Right? Are you in financial services? Are you healthcare? How many of you here are in the media and entertainment industry? How many of you are in financial services? Pharmaceuticals? Healthcare? Higher education? Government? Bunch of government folks. Right? Think through what's your industry like. Does the industry itself embrace new technologies? Do you need to have industry regulations approved before you can go ahead and do anything? And that all impacts what your adoption rate is going to be. Some industries are really fast moving, and others are trying to play catch up. Is your goal to be ahead of the two guys in the garage who are building the next big thing? So through that, the question becomes, what is my journey? How are you going to get there? Every journey is unique. We know this. Every company is going to do their own thing. So where is it that you are going to play, and where are you going to lead your organization? Right. And we want you to let the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework be your guide. Right. The Cloud Adoption Framework is a comprehensive framework that we in professional services, alongside other colleagues in AWS, developed across 400 plus engagements. We saw patterns in terms of how companies were migrating to the cloud. We saw patterns in the challenges that these customers were facing. We saw patterns in terms of the issues that you had to deal with. And through that, we came across 7 perspectives that we think work through and actually help you lay out what your framework should look like when migrating to the cloud. And through that, we've developed a step-by-step process to help you build out your cloud roadmap and execute and deliver on it. So the Cloud Adoption Framework has 7 perspectives. You have the business perspective, which is all about identifying and delivering business value. Think about what your business objectives are. How do you align IT to it? How do you think about cost optimization? How do you think about cost control? The platform perspective is all about technology. So what is your AWS infrastructure going to look like? What are the services that you're going to utilize? How is that architecture going to coincide and work with your current on-prem network? Right. And then you go on and you start thinking about the maturity. How do you get from your current state to your target state architecture in AWS? Right? Well, who are the people who need to be involved? How do I think about skills and training and education? How do I make sure I have the right staff? How do I think about my org design? Do I have to change the way I operate my business? Right? Do I need to have more engineers and more developers and less people focusing on racking and stacking hardware? When I talk about process, what is going to happen in terms of how I manage applications? What's my delivery model going to look like? How do I change the way I actually come up with an idea, build it, test it, and move it into production? Right? Do I want to move from a pure waterfall method to more of an agile CI/CD framework? Security, top of mind. How many of you have CISOs who let you do anything and everything you want to do? Maybe? You wish? So security is key. And we want to make sure that as you go ahead and move to the cloud and this journey evolves, that you're keeping security in mind. The key point is you still have to maintain security across all of your applications. However, the way you do it change. The requirements stay the same, but the mechanism to actually get there change. You don't have to worry about firewall rules anymore. We call them security groups. But you're still responsible for making sure that you have certain ports that are blocked. Right? And then finally, operating. How do you deal with steady-state operations? Right? How do you have the processes and guidance to your teams to be able to think about service management? You have this whole ITSM process that's now shifted into the cloud world. How do I think about my cloud operating model? Who needs to be involved? What gets done? So what we want you to do is start to develop your roadmap using the AWS CAF. Start by understanding what your strategy is and what are your market drivers. Right? We really see 3 key pieces that are inputting into this. Right? You have your business strategy, you have your market drivers, and you also have industry drivers. All of that can help you develop what your cloud strategy is and make sure it's aligned to your business. Engage your stakeholders and engage them early. Bring them on the journey with you. Until you actually get other folks who agree with you, and especially those who are detractors, who don't want to, who don't understand this, you're not going to be very successful. You need to communicate early, communicate often, and bring these people alongside you and get them to understand and get them to help you. Right? And define measurable goals. Monitor it. Dictate small, iterative measurements that can be utilized over and over again. Show progress. Understand where you are today. Baselining your current state is very important because you need to understand how much of a shift you need to make. Am I in step 1 and I need to go to step 10, meaning there's multiple pieces in between? Or if I'm already at step 7, I just need to take 2 small steps. Right? Understand what your current capabilities are, both in terms of technology, in terms of people. Right? Understand where your gap is in terms of what cloud is going to allow you to do. Do you already have monolithic base applications, or do you have very microservices, SOA-oriented framework already in place? Can that be just brought over and replicated? Right? And determine your initiatives. Understand sort of where you have to go, what are the big changes that you have to make, and use workshops to go ahead and define what these look like. And then start prioritizing them. Right? Plan your journey. We in AWS have done a number of these projects, and throughout the time, we've actually developed quite a number of reusable artifacts. We understand where companies are and how they will need to go out alongside their journey in terms of what their activities matrix needs to look like. We've developed assessment toolbooks to be able to help plan this. There are questionnaires that we know we need to ask application owners. There's questionnaires we know we need to ask the infrastructure teams. There's the ability to make sure that the designs that you make, starting in the beginning, carry on through to the end. Right? Figure out what your communication plan is going to be. How are you going to manage upwards and downwards? How many of you in the room are C-level executives? How many of you are the ones who are actually doing stuff? I love everyone. So think through how are you going to manage the communication upwards and downwards. Until you have top-down support, not everyone is going to be along the road. And as you are going through and working on and helping your company move through your cloud journey, make sure that you're communicating the right information upwards, and you're telling your peers, and you're telling the folks who are working with you. It's really important to organize and develop this plan early on, and to be able to provide this information to all the stakeholders involved. Right? And then track your progress. Right? Measure and report success often. Until you do so, your momentum is going to be lost. And then think about how you're going to execute and deliver. So you have a number of key activities that you need to do. You need to explore why you're doing it. You need to understand the gaps that exist. You have to start preparing and planning for what the activity and training is going to be. And you have to think about how you're going to migrate and develop. Either are you going to migrate applications over as is today? Or are you going to re-architect them as they migrate over? Or are you going to lift and shift them to AWS? Or are you going to say, I'm going to just redesign everything from scratch, and I'm going to enable my teams to be able to have that goal, to be able to say, I created a brand new application that is agile, flexible, using microservices and all the tools that are assigned to me. And as you do it, as you go on your journey, you're going to have multiple sprints. You're going to be able to iterate. Every time that you iterate, you're going to have some lessons learned. Take those lessons learned, document them, and then start to go ahead and update your plan. It's not going to be the same plan that you start off on day 1 that you're going to use 6 months down the road. Right? Find out what your timeline is, develop your plan. As you iterate on your multiple sprints, update your plan. And use the lessons learned to be able to measure and identify what are new opportunities. So as we've done these projects throughout with customers large and small, there's really a number of different elements that are key to a successful journey. So first of all, where are my C-level executives in the room? Executive sponsorship, you guys are key. Right? These projects are not successful until you get executive sponsorship. Right? You need the word coming from the top down to be able to explain why and how we're doing this, what is it going to bring, and be able to explain to everyone how IT is going to help enable the business. Right? Second thing is you have to be all in. I was in a session earlier where we had director of IT from Harvard Business Review, and he says, you don't have to go all in. You have to really go all in. And what that means is you can't say I'm going to put in 10% of my stuff into the cloud and leave 90% on. I'm going to put 25% in. I have to be really in. I'm going to be committed to it. And through that, you develop a cloud-first strategy. Define your vision, incentivize team members to say, I want you to put to the cloud. And if you don't want to go to cloud, you have to explain to me why not. How many of you have a cloud-first strategy? For those of you who don't, why don't you? The question is not how, right? It's when. And so if you're developing a cloud-first strategy, you want to align the incentives so that people can come ahead and make it very easy. You want to come to the cloud? Great. We already have a CloudFormation template set up for you that you can easily deploy your app into. If you want to go on-prem, well, now you have to go through a review board. Now you have to go ahead and explain why this can't happen. You have to go through these other hurdles. Define your principles and standards. So the biggest thing we find is you have companies that define architecture. That's great. You've created an AWS environment for employees to work in and play with, but then you've not defined any standards. You have to build those guidelines, those patterns that people can use so that you have standardization across, because governance is key. You have to be able to know what gets deployed, whether it was deployed appropriately, whether it was secured appropriately, depending on the workload. Right? Is this a highly regulated application or workload? Is this an internal confidential information that it's going to contain? How do I know that the right NACLs are set up, that the right security groups are in place? How do I know that I have the right IAM policies? Being able to define the governance standards that's going to work alongside your cloud framework is vital. Experiment. Give your teams the ability to try and test new things. Create a sandbox environment, create a development environment. You can put guardrails in it to say, hey, if anything that anyone's allowed to do anything that they want, as long as it stays within $1,000 a month, $500 a month. Define what your guardrails are. You cannot spin up anything larger than a T2. So if you want to spin up a T2 micro, small, medium, large, we're OK with it. Anything more, then you have to go to an exception. But enable and empower your employees to be able to use the cloud. Allow them to test new products and features. There are a number of new things announced this week. Go ahead and give them the opportunity to try it out. Sign up for beta testing programs. Define the standards, publish guardrails, and then allow them to go ahead and learn and adopt cloud. The more people understand how easy it is to use AWS and move to the cloud, the more fans you'll get. Develop a cloud center of excellence. Now we have a lot of different names for this. Some people call it a cloud center of excellence. Some people call it a cloud foundation setup. Some people call it my cloud team. Whatever it may be. Create a centralized group and team to be able to manage and promote the cloud. You want to have a team of experts that can be called upon. This is your SWAT team. This is your team not only that's going to design your cloud, but it's going to be available for everyone else to use and come to for guidance, for questions. Right? And this team doesn't have to be your own team alone. Partner with your AWS colleagues. Right? You have your AWS account manager. You have your solutions architects. You have your professional services folks. You have technical account managers. Work in conjunction with them to define what your cloud center of excellence looks like. You're also able to go outside of it and use our wide APN network and use our wide array of partners. Right? Think through what that team is going to be. You can keep it small internally. You can have people who come in and sub from time to time. You can build a team that has a rotational program where people can come in, learn things, and then go back out into their own teams. Right? Organizational change management. Think about what your new operating model is going to look like. How are you going to launch new products? How are you going to maintain your environment? How are you going to define policies and processes? What are going to be the standards that you're going to use? How many of you have on-prem standards today in terms of what OS people are allowed to use? How many of you have the same standards on-prem, on AWS? Why can't you have the same standards? Why can't you go ahead and allow people to say, you're allowed to use Red Hat, you're allowed to use CentOS, you're allowed to use Windows. If you want to use SUSE, come back and ask me for an exception. Think about what the economics are going to be. How are you going to understand where and when people are going to deploy and what the costs are going to be for that deployment? And then training. Training is absolutely vital to getting your teams up and ready on AWS. However, training is absolutely useless if they don't have anything to do after they're done with training. How many of you have gone through an AWS training course, whether it be SysOps or architecting on AWS? Right? These training courses are very useful. They teach you, they guide you, but if you don't have anything to work on after you're done with training, most of the knowledge gets lost. So make sure you have a project set up for these people to come back and work on, whether that project is 20% of their time, 50% of their time, or 100% of their time. Send your folks to training, work with AWS to create these training classes, and then get them to working on a project. And finally, your adoption roadmap. So define your adoption roadmap, start small, iterate, have lessons learned, measure these successes, benchmark them, and then be able to relay that back and manage and update your plan and manage the communication going forward. Right? All of these things combined will go ahead and help you become very successful in your journey to the cloud. How does that really work in real life? We have Nick Otto here from SAS who's going to talk through what their journey to the cloud looks like and how they were able to implement some of these concepts.
Thanks, Shabazz. So before I get started, how many of you can still feel bass resonance from last night? I rolled out of bed this morning and thought I have to speak today, and I have confetti on my clothes from last night, and my bones are resonating, and my voice is hoarse. And so that meant yesterday was a really, really good day. And I appreciate your resilience and pushing through to the end of the conference, coming here as talk at the end of the day. My name is Nick Otto. I lead a group at SAS that's focused on global hosting and cloud strategy, along with oversight for global information security and IT audit and compliance. You might find that to be an odd combination. It's very, very intentional and has a lot to do with our approach to moving into the cloud. Do you know about SAS? How many people here know about SAS? Assuming I don't need to cover this slide, but just in case, we are the leader in analytics. We take our approach to innovative analytics and we help you make better decisions. That's what SAS does, wide-ranging suite of analytics products, and we can push hardware like no one's business. And so our journey to the cloud's a little bit different because of the long legacy of innovation, how much time we've spent tuning our applications for things like hardware to get maximum results and the best time. And so this was some of the things that went into our approach as we walk through cloud. And we see cloud through three different lenses. One is the traditional consumption of cloud services. So within IT, we consume cloud. We have a few applications that we're running for the enterprise. So we have that lens of a cloud consumer of off-premises cloud and on-premises cloud. We also are a hosting business. And so we have SAS Cloud Analytics, where we are a cloud provider for customers that are consuming cloud from us. And then we have the lens of producing software and enabling software to run in customer clouds. So it gives us a unique perspective of all three areas of cloud. And within IT, we're working across all those business units to bring consistency of approach and engagement to the different business units. We're huge supporters of self-service IT infrastructure, so you'll see that theme throughout my presentation. And then we have this concept called the analytics of things. So we see this as the Internet of Things, the massive amount of big data that will come from that, things like event stream processing, and how you will derive insight from this massive new wave of data. We consider this to be like the blueprint of the future. So I look forward to spending the next 90 minutes with you. Is that how long I have? Talking about our journey. So we started our journey about 2 years ago. My organization is relatively new. 2 years ago, I have what we would call a rogue state. So we had many cloud efforts underway across many divisions. We had some snowflakes in there of production. We had things that were close to the customer, IT and efforts, R&D efforts, very typical environment for a large company. Now, how many of you have people within your company that are using their corporate credit card to consume cloud services? All right, so that's a very typical model. We had the same situation. Right now, if that happens, I actually catch you and then I move you into the fold, right? But we had this rogue environment. We didn't have a lot of coordination. We had a lot of redundant efforts, a little bit of the wild, wild west taking place. Our transitional phase was really just starting to put up road signs. Rather than come in with a hammer and start telling people we have to bring you into governance and move you over, started putting those road signs up from the the hosting and cloud organization. And we're going to help point the way and guide you towards a governed environment. We started giving people secondary roles. So you've been playing in cloud, you've been experimenting in cloud. Now can you help us form our center of excellence as a secondary role? It's a little bit of a loose confederation of services. And then we started playing an advocacy and a consulting type role. So going out and working with the business and advocating for the business or consulting with the business. And that was our transitional phase. It took us about 18 months to go through that phase till we've come to this place of governance, where we've built a group called Cloud Foundation Services. I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. That's our Center of Excellence, Cloud Center of Excellence. And now we have guardrails. So we have a place where you can play. We put appropriate guardrails in place. And we're functioning more like trusted advisors. And so in this maturity journey, you want to get to that trusted advisor space. And where that leads you is to the circle of trust. And I like the circle of trust concept, because that's saying if you follow this journey with me from the business and you're leveraging our services, then not only am I going to trust you to do what's right in the business, let you play or build, do what you need to do with Amazon, but I'm also expecting you to trust me to provide the foundational services that you need. So security, audit, compliance, all of those things that have to take place behind the scenes. So this is a two-way trust. And you want to stay in the circle of trust. You know, we could quote the movie about once being in the circle of trust. Don't want to be outside of it. So how do we apply the Cloud Adoption Framework? So it started with our executive leadership. You know, we established executive direction. We established my team, all right, focused on business operations. And so the CIO is very engaged. Not only does he set the direction, but he helps sell the direction on a regular basis. I spend a fair amount of time with our CIO, and we talk about, you know, where do we need to message differently? Where do we need to engage the business differently? And then who needs to do that engagement? So we're very thoughtful about how we engage, where we engage, and with whom we engage to drive our strategy. We have a new function in IT called Business Operations Specialist. If you're in the application development world, we're all familiar with business analyst. So we've taken that concept, brought that concept into IT, and have folks that are business operations mindset. They don't do delivery. They don't do coding. They sit between folks that need to do work in the cloud and the business objectives. And they act kind of as shepherds. And we have a strong focus on business engagement and partnership, where we go out and spend time with the business, spend time in partnership with them, and try and bring us together and run the journey. One of the things that I do is I fund consulting for projects out of my organization for another group without an expectation that they repay that or they have some way to budget for that. So if I recognize a business unit is trying to achieve something in the cloud, but they're suffering for resources, they need some expertise, I will offer to fund the consulting that goes in there. And breaking that mindset of, well, we have to operate to a project budget or a plan, it's best for me if I help you early on, because it saves me the pain of coming back and cleaning up things after you later on. And then we also believe in this concept of embracing cloud enablement, embracing the concept of cloud native applications, all the things that make adopting cloud efficient and effective and scalable for your organization before you declare your cloud first strategy. You have to be careful with that declaration. So if you come out and say, we're going to be cloud first, I expect a certain amount of things moved to the cloud, it's too easy for your IT managers or your application managers to lift and shift something and say, I've got cloud now. Right? So if you set a standard first, help people understand what it means to be effectively in the cloud, then start declaring your cloud first strategy. We've kind of found that worked out very well for us. And then cost and risk management from very early on. We're 100% transparent with cost. If you've worked with IT infrastructure organizations, and how many people are infrastructure as opposed to DevOps? So, you know, and I was an infrastructure guy. I did infrastructure and ops for 20 years. We're not always transparent with our cost. All right, you know, we kind of tell the business what the server cost, or we might inform the project of what that piece of work they're doing is going to cost, but we don't share that broadly with the entire company. Well, one of the decisions we made with cloud was we will extract all the cost and utilization information from Amazon. We will load it all in SaaS visual analytics, and we'll publish it to the entire company. So if you're a SaaS employee, you can go to our internal visual analytics dashboard, and if you're just curious about what a division's doing in Amazon, you can look at the account structure, how much cost they have, the utilization, and you can start asking questions about, you know, what are they doing over here? We're very, very, very transparent with cost and utilization. And we found that as a very helpful thing, and also a very huge culture change, not just for IT to share that cost, but for some of the business divisions. So what happens now is when I spend more money on cloud, it's very apparent to anybody who wants to understand where it's being spent. They can see what projects are driving it. And that can spawn business conversations about, we see this cost increasing on these new projects. What are they tied to? How can we align with those? Maybe if this group is driving a certain direction, we see that and we see they're doing work, how can we bring that together? And we take that data and we enrich it with internal data so we have a very clear picture of what we're doing with cloud. We move through the framework, all right, with sandboxes, support, and focus. We really feel that you have to make it easy to experiment in the cloud, but you have to do it with support and with guidance, a set of standards, those sorts of things. And we have a team called Cloud Foundation Services I mentioned earlier, and it's a semi-dedicated team and kind of a virtual team. It depends on what role you are on the organization. And we have our cloud portal internal, so if you want an account, you can just get an account. We enable that. We do key management for you. So that's those guardrails. We can keep you safe working in the cloud. And then we have, if you say I'm learning or I'm doing some prototyping, we drop you right into a sandbox, put you in a VPC. Life is good. If you want to move from that to a semi-production environment, we can do that. We give you the rules for, all right, you're doing X, Y, and Z. You can't have customer data. You can't do that external. So that way, the folks that want to experiment can experiment. They can do it within the rules and the construct that keeps the company data safe. And we believe in sharing best practices and common tooling. And then we continue to move through around this idea of paving the way and equipping for your journey. These new models and the processes and the paradigms cause you to rethink how you approach IT, how you approach what you do. My own personal team is kind of exhibiting this. We have very little operational responsibility. So we live within IT. We provide strategy and direction and guidance, but we don't really own operations. And for some of the folks on the team, that's a mental mind shift for them. A lot of infrastructure guys, they want to hold the keys, because if you have those keys and you have operations, then you associate the value of your team with, well, we're secure because we run X. My team has to sell our value every day. So we have to be internal salespeople to keep our team's value first and foremost within the organization. So they will use our services. This concept of train, play, learn, and assess. We really feel that you need to encourage people to train, take the training, you need to allow them to play, you want them to learn, and then you want to assess what they're doing. This is that wash, rinse, repeat cycle, because it doesn't do much good, and we found this out early on. If you just train people, let them play, let them learn, but then you're never assessing what they were actually doing. So get into that cycle and watch what they're doing and assess that, and then you might find those people that can come join shared virtual team and help you with cloud operations. And you have to paint this clear vision of what are the skills that are important in the future state organization. So if I'm here today, the organization is going to be over here tomorrow. What skills are important in that future state organization? And define that and provide the opportunity for people to create their own journey to that future state and not shy away from that, because there will be staff that are uncomfortable with that, and that's really not your problem, right? In IT, we have to reinvent ourselves. If you paint a clear vision of where things are headed, give people every opportunity to equip themselves, reskill themselves, and participate. If you have people that opt out, you just have to accept that's going to happen, right? And many times we worry about that a little too much. And if we're doing a really good job of painting the future state vision, I think most people will opt in. And then document everything and collaborate and share on everything you're doing. So I think we have to get to a state of cloud thinking as part of the mentality of the organization, which is automate every single possible thing you can and move your infrastructure team to an infrastructure as code type of mindset, which is tough for some of the folks to get their heads around because you're speaking to a lot of their roles. I firmly believe this is where we're all headed. And then lastly, we have this continuous cycle of enablement and guidance and trusting going through the framework. And this journey continues. This is also where you bolt your IT service management experience into your cloud journey. Just because you adopt DevOps and you adopt Agile doesn't mean you devalue IT service management. We have to bring IT service management along with us. And that outer ring on ITIL, that CSI process that's wrapped around the other 6 core books of ITIL is key to your cloud journey. You're always assessing, always iterating, and driving your service management framework within what you're doing with cloud. Consistently adopting new technologies and services. This mindset of I don't go from point A to point B and I'm in the cloud, because every time you turn around, Amazon's releasing a new service. So just getting used to that constant reiteration, phasing things out, phasing new things in. If you're a software development firm, you have to continually work on product enablement. For there's something new in the cloud, how do I take advantage of it? Because those new features are many times the features that allow you to drive costs down of running your application. Drive costs down, it drives up business value. All right, this does bring challenges for staffing and skill. We reassess staff on a very, very regular basis to understand what tools do they need, what skills do they need, so that they're prepared. And we always keep an eye on security. This is why security is in my organization. So as we continue down the path of moving SaaS towards the cloud, we have the security team right there with it, along with audit and compliance. So when we have a discussion about moving from A to B, whether that's on-prem to off-prem, or whether that's into a different type of environment on-prem or between hosting facilities, security and compliance are never following. Security and compliance are engaged very, very early on, so they know what's coming. And all of this is so that we can take our IT organization, have our IT organization move at the same pace and change rate that the business does. And that's our story.
Thanks, Nick. So as we look through the different projects that we in professional services has done, the different projects that we've talked to customers as they've gone through their journey to adopt the cloud, there's a few lessons learned that have come up over and over again. So first of all is incorporate your business requirements into your strategy. Understand what it is that the business wants to do and try to make sure that IT can help enable the business. Right? Align your operational capabilities with your business strategy. Make sure you have the right staff, make sure you have the right processes to be able to enable this. Incorporate security designs to meet your compliance needs. Many customers are in regulated environments or in regulated industries. Make sure that security is job zero. Take the same approach that AWS does. Incorporate security into your design to go meet your compliance needs. Right? Introduce a DevOps culture. Right? Enable and encourage automation. Nick mentioned that automation is key. And in order to really be able to leverage the power of the cloud, the power of AWS, automating both your infrastructure, automating your deployments are all key to be able to have a successful journey. Right? And understand the maturity of your IT delivery model. Right? And support and develop your talent. It's a very, very small world out there in terms of having the right skill sets available. We have problem finding the right talent. Nick has problem finding the right talent. I'm sure many of you are having trouble finding the right talent. I'm sure many of you are talking to one another to switch talents. But really, make sure that you're enabling your employees to be able to learn AWS and then also to be able to keep up their skills. Right? Keep these pieces in mind, and come talk to us. We're more than welcome. We're more than happy to help you, and we welcome all of your questions. So, given the fact that it's Friday, it's the last session, we wanted to keep the presentation, to a minimum. So we still have about 20 minutes left. We wanted to open up the room for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come up to the mic and ask questions. Otherwise, have fun and enjoy your ride home, and make sure you put $100 in black.